Shalom Aleichem. Likutei Sichas, volume 27, the third Sicha, the Parshas Acharei. The discussion is the mitzvah of Pikuach Nefesh Deicha Shabbos, Pikuach Nefesh Deicha Kol HaTorah Kula. When it comes to saving a life, it overrides Shabbos and it overrides all of the mitzvahs. And it's a pasuk in today's Parsha where it says that Asher Yasa Isam Ha'adam, you should keep all the mitzvahs. V'chai b'hem, you should live with it. Here we learn V'chai b'hem v'lo yishiyam b'hem. We're supposed to live and not die with it. And from this pasuk, as we're going to see, we learn out the fact that the Jewish principle, the Torah principle, that Pekuach Nefesh, that saving a life, Deicha Kol Torah Kol, it overrides all of Yiddishkeit except for the three cardinal sins: idolatry, adultery, and murder. And of course, it's true also about Shabbos. But we're going to see that regarding Shabbos, it's spelled out individually, and there's got to be a reason for it. So the Rebbe begins. This is a complex Lamdish Sicha, so I'm not going to cover every single detail, but I think I covered much of it. Here's a Sicha overview. This is the overview of the entire Sicha. We have all mitzvahs, and we have Shabbos. First of all, we look in the Gemara itself. The Gemara says that life-saving overrides all mitzvahs except for the big three. And he brings the pasuk. You should live with them, not die with them. But we find the Gemara also brings it regarding Shabbos, that Pekuach Nefesh is Deicha Shabbos. And it uses the same pasuk. Full disclosure regarding Pekuach Nefesh pushes away all of mitzvahs. There are various psukim brought in Gemara in various places in Shas, but including this pasuk. So the question becomes, if you taught me this lesson regarding all of Torah mitzvahs, all of Judaism, why do you have to come and zero in on Shabbos? And not just that you're teaching me the concept is true by Shabbos, but you're again using that same pasuk, that same limud, that same derivation by Shabbos. The verse is not talking about Shabbos alone. Shmartim is kol mitzvah say. The verse in today's portion is talking about all the mitzvahs. V'chai b'hem, you should live. So why are we now zeroing in and using that same limud, that same derivation for Shabbos as an individual mitzvah? And the Rebbe points out that the Rambam, in his book of laws, echoes this seeming repetition, which is found in the Gemara itself. In the laws of Yesod HaTorah, the foundations of Torah, which is the first section of laws in the whole book, Rambam says that we transgress any mitzvah to save a life, and he brings that pasuk, that verse, V'chai b'hem. Live with it, don't die with it. When it comes to the laws of Shabbos, Rambam makes a big deal. The Chuya Shabbos Eitzel B'kuach Nefesh. Shabbos is overridden when it comes to saving a life, and he goes in detail. You should not tarry. Everyone who tarries and he's taking his time to be B'chal Shabbos to save a life. It's a terrible thing, because when it comes to a person who's sick and in danger of life, even a doubt of a danger, a tiny danger of life, it's kichoil. It's like weekday. So you can do whatever he needs. And again, he evokes that pasuk. So the question is, the Rebbe's question is, why do you have to have, again, the pasuk to teach me what we already know as by Shabbos, what we know to be true by all of Judaism? Using the same pasuk, the same teaching. I think by extension, the Rebbe's question is, why is this law repeated by Shabbos? And using the same pasuk. So the Rebbe has two approaches in this Sicha. The approaches are going to represent that although Pikuach Nefesh, saving a life, overrides all mitzvahs, it overrides Shabbos in a special, unique way. And that's why it's repeated by Shabbos. It's written slightly different by Shabbos, especially in the Rambam, whose book of Halacha is written with great precision to bring out every detail. So the first approach of the Rebbe is that, and the Rebbe is going to substantiate this with diyukim, with precisions in the language of Rambam, etc., that regarding all other prohibitions, the prohibition is suspended to save a life. Regarding Shabbos, the prohibition is completely waived to save a life. The language in Hebrew/Aramaic is, when it comes to all the mitzvahs, the mitzvah is hutcha, it's pushed away, it's suspended. Let's say I have to eat pork to save a life. You ate pork, you did a sin. But the mitzvah of saving a life is so important that we say, do the sin. We suspend that prohibition. But it's there. It's prohibited. But we tell you, do it anyway, because this is much more important. Regarding Shabbos, we say hutra. It's completely permissible to save a life. It's waived completely. There is no prohibition anymore when we're dealing with life saving. That will become approach number one that the Rebbe is going to say. And therefore, it makes sense. Rambam and the Gemara repeats it, and etc. And then the Rebbe is going to dig even deeper later in the Sicha and give us approach number two, which is even a quantum leap from that. And the Rebbe is going to say that when it comes to all of Teda mitzvahs, the fact that we violate the mitzvah or the transgression to save a life, I did a violation. But for whatever reason, it's allowed because we're saving a life, etc. When it comes to Shabbos, not only is it not a violation as per the approach number one, that it's completely permitted, it's deemed permitted, it's actually a mitzvah. And it's not the mitzvah of saving a life. That's true in all of Judaism. It's a mitzvah in Shabbos observance of itself. It's part of the mitzvah of Shabbos observance to save a life, which is a bombshell and a huge chiddush. Just for clarity, and this is a very complex lumdisha thing, and there's a lot of details which I'm not knowledgeable of. But my understanding is that approach one is not novel to the Rebbe. It's brought in different achreinim and different commentaries, and they argue back and forth. The Rebbe suggests that approach as approach number one, and he proves it with his own precision in the language of the Rambam. Approach two, to my knowledge, is a total novelty of the Rebbe. Okay, so we have the overview of the Sicha. Now let's take a look. I have two more screens like this, and one is going to be approach one, and one is going to be approach two. So let's go. So here we have approach one that the Rebbe takes. Again, to recap the problem, which is on top of the screen, that we find both in the Gemara and in the Rambam, that there's a repetition of the same concept, that saving a life overrides it. Not only that, to add insult to injury, the same limo, the same verse is used to derive it from. So it's a total repetition. It's strange. Then if you look in Rambam, not only it's a repetition, but in the laws of Shabbos, he digs deeper, he writes more detail, and he even wrote in his introductory laws and foundations of Torah, which apply to all of mitzvahs. So the Rebbe's approach number one is going to be, as we said, that all of Torah mitzvahs, it's suspended. That means that if I did the sin, I did a sin, but I did a much greater mitzvah, and therefore that mitzvah trumps the sin, and you're supposed to do it. Whereas by Shabbos, completely waived and becomes completely permissible. What does the Rebbe take it out of him? So the Rebbe takes this. First of all, the Rebbe points out what's the difference between the way, if it's waived or suspended. Either way, you're allowed to do it. Either way, if the life is in danger, violate Shabbos, violate any other mitzvah of the Torah. What's the difference if we define it as being suspended versus being waived? So the Rebbe says if it's just being suspended, it means there's still some kind of isser, there's still some kind of prohibition here, except we're told to do it anyway to save a life. But then we will try to make a shinui, we'll try to do it in a not normal manner. Some people will tell you they'll try to find a Gentile if they're easily available, or a child. This is a violation, except that it's so important to save a life, so we do it. But if we can get around the violation, that's even better. When it comes to Shabbos, we don't say that. We say the biggest person in the room should do it. The most religious rabbi should do it. We don't tarry. We don't look for loopholes. We don't look for roundabout ways to do it, because it's not considered a violation at all. Also, the commentaries argue and the debate that if we hold that it's completely waived, that means a person who is deathly ill when it comes to Shabbos, it's like weekday. So not only can we break Shabbos when it comes to doing things that he needs for his survival, but we can break Shabbos to take care of all of his needs. You know, he needs to have a bath to keep clean. You can cook up the water. Don't paskin halacha from this shir or from this Sicha even. But there is such a concept that if the person is in sakana, is in danger of life, and we therefore deem them that there is no prohibition at all for Shabbos, that's like weekday. That's the language of the Rambam. And therefore, you can violate Shabbos for everything. So that will become the difference between merely suspending the violation or waiving it. That if it's waived, we're not going to look for a child or a Gentile. We're not going to look to do it in a roundabout way with a shinoi. And we're going to be able to violate it even for needs that are not part of the life-threatening needs. They're just needs of his well-being. You can do it. It's like a weekday. Where does the Rebbe prove this from the Rambam's language? That in fact, that's what the Rambam would hold, according to this first approach. That hutra, by Shabbos, it's not just pushed away, suspending the violation, but it's completely waived and permissible. So the Rebbe brings a few proofs. First of all, take a look at the language of the Rambam. That when he says like this, he says, Shabbos becomes like weekday. That's a very strong language. You know, it doesn't say by the laws of eating treif that the treif becomes like kosher, etc. Did all that with every other mitzvah. This is a very strong language. Shabbos becomes like weekday. Also, that the Rambam in the laws of Shabbos adds more detail than he does in the laws which is speaking in the laws of foundations of Torah, which is speaking about all of Judaism. And that is that the Rambam writes, and I wrote it in very short, but it's wordy. The Rambam says that you should not tarry and you should save the life. It's like weekday, because you should live with it and not die with it. And the Rambam continues and says, because Torah's laws are not given as vengeance to the world, but rather compassion and kindness and peace. Beautiful language. Mishpatei HaTorah, Einam Nekama Ba'olam. They're not here to hurt us. Arachmim, Vachsadim B'Shalom. They're here for compassion, kindness, and peace. And to the heretics who say that it's a Shabbos violation to save a life, the verse refers to them when it says that God says, I gave them chukim lo tevim u'mishpatim lo yichlu behem. To them, the way they interpret Torah in a corrupt way, Hashem says, yeah, I gave them mitzvahs and laws that you cannot live with and laws that aren't good, lo tevim. It's not the way to be. Says the Rebbe, look at the verses and look at the language of the Rambam. He's not just saying do it because you have to live. He's saying the laws of Torah aren't vengeance. They're there for kindness. And therefore the law itself cannot be in place when it's going to create death. When it comes to all other mitzvahs, it doesn't say that. So let's use my example of eating the chazer. God forbid, God spare us, right? The chazer is treif. It's no good. But there's another law that you have to live that overrides it. Here in the laws of Shabbos, the Rambam says the laws of Torah referring to Shabbos observance are not a vengeance. But they themselves have to be compassionate and kind and peaceful. And therefore, Hilchas Shabbos would say, you should do it. Not just Hilchas Pikuach Nefesh, the laws of saving a life would say, ignore Hilchas Shabbos now, but you got to do it. No, laws of Shabbos would say, this cannot be, this is vengeance. Laws of Torah cannot be vengeful and cannot be hurtful. They have to be peaceful and compassionate. And therefore, Shabbos says do it. Or why? Because it must be that it's completely permitted. It's been waived. So the language of the Rambam is that he's making the fact, this overriding of the laws of Shabbos to save a life, he makes them part of the laws of Shabbos. It's not a violation of the laws of Shabbos. The laws of Shabbos are not given to begin with to include such a case. That's spelled out in the language of the Rambam by explaining that the laws of Torah are not vengeance. He didn't have to say that. He could have said the laws of Torah are what they are. But if there's a case of death, there's another value that trumps it. Now, he puts this concept of saving the life, that takes priority, he puts it as part of the law of the Torah. Which law are we talking about? The law of Shabbos. That means the laws of Shabbos don't even apply here. When it comes to saving a life, Shabbos becomes like weekday in all aspects. And also the last line that I'm highlighting there, that to the heretics who say it's Shabbos violation, I've given them the laws that are no good and the laws that are not livable. Again, defining the law itself as a misconstrued law. You think that I gave you a law that's supposed to create death, that you should keep Shabbos in the process of killing somebody? You have bad laws. You have laws that are not livable. And I don't give such laws, says Hashem. The precisions here are very, very powerful. And you could say that it's a very strong argument of the Rebbe. Again, there's a lot of discussion in footnote, and the Rebbe himself, when he moves on to approach 2, is not saying that he's sticking with this, because there's a lot of the Acharei and the later commentaries who say that the Rambam it does not hold of this approach. But this is approach 1 in the Sicha. And then to make it even sweeter, the Rebbe wants to show substantiation. So first of all, he showed it in the Rambam, in the Diyukim that we said. And there's one more diuk, there's one more precision. This line here is found in both places of the Rambam, in the laws of foundations of Torah, with regard to all of Judaism, and with regard to Shabbos. They're proof from the verse. But if you read it, you'll see that there's a difference. In that the laws of foundation of Torah, he repeats the words v'chai behem. The verse says, in both cases, he quotes the verse, v'chai behem, you should live with them. But in the laws of foundation of Torah, he repeats it. You should live with them and not die with them. Whereas in Rambam, in laws of Shabbos, he just quotes the verse, you should live with them and not die with them. So the Rebbe says there's a reason for this. By the Rebbe, every word in Rambam is precise and perfect. Why? What's the reason that over here he repeats the verse before he gives its conclusion, and in the laws of Shabbos he does not? So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe wants to argue that in the laws of foundations of Torah, which are referring to all the rest of Judaism, he repeats it because it's a derivation. You should live by them. Aha! Here we learn, live by them and don't die by them. Whereas in the laws of Shabbos, we say live by them and not die by them. It's not a derivation. That's the actual meaning of the verse, which would indicate that the mitzvah in the beginning, to begin with, was given with the principle that you should live with it, and therefore, if you're not living with it, the mitzvah doesn't apply. All right, so to sum it up, the Rebbe gives, let's call it 4 different diyukim, 4 different precisions to prove his approach of why Rambam would hold that by laws of Shabbos, prohibition is not just suspended, but completely waived. Number 1 is that by Shabbos, he says that Shabbos for a person dangerously ill is like weekday, that language you don't find by any other mitzvah. Number 2 is that he quotes the verse that the Rambam, actually, his language is that the Torah's laws aren't vengeance, but the Torah's laws themselves are compassion, kindness, and peace, indicating not that you save the life because another law overrides it, but its law itself must be defined as a compassionate and loving and kind law, and therefore the definition is that it has to be completely permissible. And in the same vein is the verse that he brings that Hashem says to the heretic, I've given you bad laws that are not livable. That means that becomes the definition of the law if you misconstrue it. But in the right way is it should be laws that are livable, and therefore if it's not livable, the law never applies. I hope I'm being clear about it, but these are very, very strong diyukim, derivations in the Rambam's language. And then finally, the diyuk of that we just said, that in the language of the Rambam, by all the mitzvahs, he repeats that word v'chai b'hem, and in the laws of Shabbos he does not. You see, you would think if you're repeating it, it's more of an emphasis, but here it becomes the opposite. If you repeat it, that means it's a derivation. That's how the Talmud works. There says a verse, you should live by them. Aha! Here we know, you should live by it and don't die by them. But in the laws of Shabbos, it's not a derivation. It's a simple meaning of the words. When we read that verse in the context of Shabbos, it's as if it's saying, keep Shabbos and live by them, don't die by them. It's not a derivation. It's the simple rule. The Rebbe makes it much sweeter now by indicating that Rashi, who is the commentary on the Gemara, and the simple Gemara, the pshat of the Gemara, if you will, is similar to the way he does on the Chumash. Rashi, if you read Rashi in different places where the Gemara has these two systems, all mitzvahs versus Shabbos, you'll find the Rebbe's approach up to these two, the way he just explained it in Rambam. Regarding all, Rashi brings both this limud, this derivation from the Shas, v'chai b'hem, you should live by them. He brings it in both instances. But when it comes to all of Torah mitzvahs, the language of Rashi is, life is more beloved to mitzvahs than mitzvahs. The life of a Yid is more precious to Hashem than mitzvahs. And God says, break my mitzvahs and let the Yid live. But here you hear clearly that you're breaking the mitzvahs. You're breaking the mitzvahs. But the life is more important. So it's like there's a little bit of a tug of war here. Whereas when it comes to Shabbos, Rashi says, he should live with mitzvah observance, not risk death in his observance. I'm paraphrasing a little bit for brevity, but this is the content of Rashi's words there. That means the fact that you should live with mitzvahs, and that's the definition of its observance. And if you're risking death in its observance, that's not good. Not just because your life is more precious than the mitzvah. That can't be the mitzvah. Very beautiful. So this is beautiful. This is already one beautiful explanation showing the how special Shabbos is, that it's on a whole different level. That even there we see the preciousness of that the life of a Yid waives it completely. Then the Rebbe goes further, and the Rebbe says another approach. And why does he give another approach? Why does he give another approach? Why do we need another approach? The first half of the screen, I just posted the Rambam and the first approach. But the Rebbe has questions. The Rebbe has questions. Which, the way the Sicha is presented, he's not saying it's a question and therefore it's undoing the first approach. The first approach may very well stand. But he's saying that's not enough. There's got to be something deeper. For 2 points. First of all, that the Rambam's source is the verse "V'chai b'hem," you should live by them. This is not talking about Shabbos; it's talking about all of Judaism. You just gave a beautiful presentation that Shabbos is different than all of Judaism in the way it treats life and death, risk of life. That is completely waived. And how? You learn it out from a verse. But that same verse, it refers to all of Judaism. That's the verse of today's portion. It says, "Ushmartem es mitzvah." So you should do all my mitzvahs and keep them. And v'chai b'hem, to live with it. It's not a verse about Shabbos. So if Rambam wanted to bring home the point that Shabbos is unique and special, and it stands alone from all the mitzvahs, he would have brought a verse about Shabbos. We're going to see in a second. There is a verse about Shabbos, which teaches us the concept that you should violate Shabbos to save a life. But that's not the one the Rambam brings. He brings a verse that's applicable to all of Judaism. Not only that, the Rambam's verse, but also Rambam's statement. Rambam says, the laws of Torah are not vengeance, but compassion, kindness, and peace. It doesn't say the laws of Shabbos aren't vengeance, the laws of Torah. So the Rambam seems to speaking two sides of his mouth. If the Rambam in fact meant to repeat Shabbos, which was the opening problem of the Sicha, and not only repeat it, but double down on Shabbos regarding the fact that you should override it, the person, it's like weekday. So he wouldn't, why would he bring a verse and a language that's applicable to all of Judaism? This is a major problem. This indicates that somehow Rambam wants to say there's something special about Shabbos. Proof is that he speaks about Shabbos in a special way, in a stronger way, and he repeats it. And And he brings these extra lines and extra verses in Shabbos, not in the laws and foundations of Torah. But what verses did he choose? Verses and statements of his own that are universally applicable. So he's like teasing us. He said, comes to Shabbos, there's a different ball game. Don't like the rest of Judaism, you're supposed to save a life. Of course, Shabbos, forget about it. You know why? Because mitzvahs they're meant to be compassion. Not Shabbos, mitzvahs. This is the language. Torah laws aren't vengeance. It doesn't speak about Shabbos, but they're all about mitzvahs. And also the verse that you say to the heretics, I've given them chukim loy tovim, I gave them laws that are not good. It doesn't speak about Shabbos. It speaks about all mitzvahs. So the Rebbe says the Rambam is trying to tell us something, and this is going to be the direction the Rebbe is leading us. Rambam is trying to tell us something, that there is a lesson here that is really universal, and it applies to all mitzvahs. However, it's emphasized by Shabbos, and I guess it's derived from the Torah's approach to Shabbos. And therefore, these verses and statements of the Rambam that he chooses are those that are universal for all of mitzvahs, but he doesn't bring them when he talks about all the mitzvahs. He only brings them when he talks about Shabbos. This is a little bit of a fine point. So that's the Rebbe's question A, that you have to dig deeper. You can't just say Shabbos is different. There's got to be something more. And B, the Rambam's choice of proof. If we look in the Gemara, we find two verses that are used to prove the concept that saving a life overrides Shabbos. There's the verse that V'shamru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos, the Jewish people should keep Shabbos. All right. That from here we learn in an inverse way, desecrate one Shabbos so they should be able to keep many Shabbos. This is brought in the Gemara. Desecrate one Shabbos, you keep many Shabbos. And then there's a second derivation. This is the one the Rambam chooses. Both are found in Gemara. Rambam chooses this one, that the one that we've been talking about. You should live with it and not die by it. Now, what's the difference? As the Rebbe analyzed these two verses, there's three differences that the Rebbe points to. Number one is that the first verse applies only to Shabbos. The V'shamru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos. Keep a Shabbos so you can violate a Shabbos, you can keep many others. So it doesn't refer to all the mitzvahs. Number two is, which this number one, by the way, is curious. This number one is counterintuitive. You're teaching me, Rambam is teaching me now the law of Shabbos violation to save a life. You would think you would choose a verse that speaks about Shabbos, and that would be the Jews should keep Shabbos. Desecrate one Shabbos to keep many. Instead, he chooses a verse that applies to all mitzvahs. That's curious. That's simple, similar to the Rebbe's question A. Then there's a second difference between these two laws. The first, these two derivations, if you derive it from B'shamru b'nei Yisrael as Shabbos, that you should desecrate one Shabbos to keep many, you're desecrating Shabbos to save the person's life for the sake of Shabbos, not for the sake of the Jew. Desecrate one Shabbos, so you're going to have many Shabboses. So it's about Shabbos. It's about the holiness of Shabbos that you're trying to save, but not about the Jew so much. That's not the emphasis. But if in this other verse, which is the one the Rambam chooses, that you should desecrate to save the life, the language is the b'chaybem, that you should live. That means it's about saving Jewish life. That becomes like the main value here, which is interesting. And then there's a third difference between these two derivations. That if you use the first one, it's considered desecration. That's the language. Desecrate one Shabbos, you should keep many. There is such an approach in the Shas. But it's a desecration. Whereas the Rambam's preferred derivation, verse, that you should live by it, which means that this becomes part of the mitzvah of Shabbos. The Rebbe wants you to read that verse. This is the verse of today's portion. Which I keep my mitzvahs. In particular, we're talking now about Shabbos. And live with them. Don't die with them. That means living with them is a form of keeping my mitzvahs. And this is how the Rebbe goes to the deeper level of the explanation. This approach, number 3. That what? Approach number 2, rather. Not only like an approach number 1, that when it comes to Shabbos, when it comes to saving a life, it's completely waived, it's completely allowed, there's no desecration. It's actually a mitzvah. And it's not just the mitzvah of saving a life, which is obvious. It's the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos. This is a bombshell of the Rebbe. I run around with a Hatzalah ambulance or a walkie-talkie or whatever it is violations I do to save a life. You have 3 ways to look at it. One way is I'm doing sins, but I'm doing a much greater mitzvah, which is saving a life. That would be if Shabbos is only suspended. A higher way, which would be the approach number 1, no, it's coming to save a life. It's like weekday for you. There's no sin. There's also no mitzvah of Shabbos. You have a huge mitzvah of saving a life, which is the greatest mitzvah in the Torah. But there isn't the mitzvah of Shabbos. Right now, it's like weekday for you. The highest way, says the Rebbe digs deeper and says, it's a little bit like Bepnimis in him. It's a little bit on a Hasidic level, if you will. The Rebbe wants to say that if a person's saving a life to help a person on Shabbos, they are doing the mitzvah. Not just the mitzvah of saving a life, which is obvious. They're doing, that's Shmira Shabbos. That's the real form of keeping Shabbos. That's a bona fide form of keeping Shabbos. How can you say that? Why? This becomes the approach number 2. How can you say that? Because the Rebbe said, take a look at what Shabbos is about in the Torah. It's a covenant between God and the Jewish people. This is God's sign to the whole world. It's a covenant that you're my people. And therefore, in order to have that covenant, you need the Jewish people. And if a Jew is about to die and you save that Jew, you just did Shabbos. You just shouted Shabbos. You shouted covenant. Because a covenant is a covenant between Hashem, Beini, Vein, B'nai Yisrael, between me and my people. If you save my people, that's it. That's part of the covenant. The mitzvahs aren't given in a vacuum. Shabbos is not just given. Hashem wants Shabbos. He wants Shabbos means a covenant between him and you. And if he saves you, we should never need it. Then that's a great form of keeping Shabbos. And that would explain why Rambam, first focus on B, chooses the derivation of you should live with them rather than the first derivation that Jews should keep Shabbos. Because it's not just for the sake of Shabbos that I need you to violate it so you'll be able to keep other Shabbos. There is such a thing, but the deeper level is, what do you mean? I want to save the Jewish life. That's my covenant. The Yid. Hashem wants Shabbos. He wants the Yid to keep Shabbos. Because what's Shabbos about? It's about the covenant of the Yid. It's really all about the Yid. And therefore, also, he chooses that derivation because it's not considered a desecration at all. It's not desecrate one Shabbos to keep many others. Keep this Shabbos, so you'll keep many others. And the others you'll keep in the conventional way. And this one you'll keep by doing whatever it takes to save a Jewish life, which is what Shabbos is about. It's very novel and very Rebbe 101. The Rebbe, based on this, also explains. Let's first answer the question the Rebbe's question number 8. But in fact, the Rambam does bring a verse and a language which are universal, which seem to apply to all of Judaism. So the Rebbe quotes a chinuch, classic work of the chinuch. And the Rebbe says, this is really true about all of Judaism. All of Judaism is about the Jews. You know, they say bad parenting is, I want, that you'll do what your parents want, because if not, they won't love you. Good parenting is, you do what your parents want you to do because you know they love you. They want you to do well, they want you to work hard, be successful. So the bad parenting, this is a form of bullying. The kid knows if I'm not going to get A's, my parent's not going to love me. So I'll get A's. Then it's not about the kid, it's about the parent or about the A's. A good parent is the kid knows he loves me anyway. It's about me. And because you love me, I want to do the right thing. I don't want to disappoint you. And that's, of course, the Rebbe's approach and the true approach and the Chassidus approach to Torah mitzvahs. We're not doing because we're afraid Hashem's not going to love us. Hashem's not going to love a Yid less if he's not doing Torah mitzvahs. To the contrary, because Hashem loves a Yid unconditionally, no matter what, therefore he does Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, if that's the case, the whole purpose is, in the case of the analogy of the child, it's about the child. In the case of the analog with Hashem, it's about the Yid. It's not about Shabbos, it's not about Tefillin, not about Sukkah, Lulav, nothing. It's about the Yid. The whole thing is the Yid. It's the famous Zohar that Hashem has two things that preceded creation, the Torah, the mitzvahs, and the Jewish people. But of them, the Jew preceded. I mean, the purpose of the whole Torah mitzvahs is to connect the Yid to Hashem. In the context here of the Shabbos, it's the covenant. So therefore, says the Rebbe, it's true by all of Judaism. By all of Judaism, really, if you transgress a mitzvah to save a life, you did a mitzvah, not just the great giant mitzvah of saving a life. But you actually did that mitzvah because every mitzvah that it's its purpose. I'm feeding the guy today for food because he needs it for his life or for medication or what have you. And you might say, I'm doing the mitzvah of kashrus. And why? Because what's the mitzvah of kashrus? To connect the Yid to Hashem. All the mitzvahs are about a Yid. However, in all the mitzvahs, it's not so pronounced and proclaimed. It's emphasized in Shabbos. There's 613 mitzvahs in Torah, and they're all about the Yid. Shabbos is the mitzvah. You might say that's one of the reasons why Shabbos is so pivotal. Shabbos is up there with idolatry. I mean, it's huge. It's equal to all the mitzvahs. Because perhaps in the context of this Sicha, because Shabbos is the reason the tchei of all mitzvahs. Shabbos explains, why does Hashem want you to do mitzvahs? Aha! Because of my covenant. Because you're my kindlech, I love you. And therefore, this truism, that the Jew overrides Shabbos, that saving the life of the Jew is actually the best way to keep Shabbos, or a very high form of keeping, we shouldn't need it, but it's a very high form of keeping Shabbos. That becomes really a lesson for all of Judaism. Because it's true about all of Judaism, except that Shabbos brings home that message. Shabbos is the teacher of that message to all of Yiddishkeit. That's what Shabbos is. It's the covenant. It's the sign of Hashem's connection to us, which gives birth to all of Judaism, that connection. And therefore, in the laws and foundations of Torah, when he's talking about all of Judaism, he says the law briefly. He doesn't get involved in the details. But when he comes to Shabbos, here Rambam blows it all open, and he starts saying it's mamish like wheat. And he teaches you the lesson that the Torah laws aren't a vengeance. They're all about kindness and peace. They're all about you. Which Torah laws? All Torah laws. Because, he's going to teach you something about all Torah laws. So why does he wait till Shabbos to teach you that? Because that's what Shabbos contributes. That's Shabbos' message. To teach us the message that Yiddishkeit is really covenantal. It's really about the relationship. The Rebbe concludes the Sicha. And says that this connects to Shabbos HaGadol. That year when the Sicha was said or printed, Shabbos HaGadol was Parshas Acharei, which could happen on a leap year. And the Rebbe says, what's Shabbos HaGadol? It's called the Great Shabbos. It's the only Shabbos that's given that title. The Great Shabbos. What's so great about it? On that day, the Jews violated Shabbos. They had to do all the malacha, bringing the sheep to their bed, in order to show that they're distinct and different, and in order to make the miracle that the Egyptians will kill each other, to protect the Jews. This is hardly a big Shabbos. It's a Shabbos that Nebuch they had to violate. The answer is no. That's what is the greatness of Shabbos, that it brings home the greatness of a Jew's connection to Hashem at all costs, if you will. And therefore, the Jews themselves had to do whatever it took on that Shabbos. And there was a civil war in the Egyptians, which highlighted Hashem's love for the Jewish people. That's a great Shabbos. I heard a great story now that I want to just share. That there's a Rav, Chassidish Rebbe, Rav in Israel by the name of the Seret Visions Rebbe. And he's said to be apparently currently alive and well. And he's said to be well known for his big heart. People think of him as like the Baditchev Rebbe. Every Jew is perfect and wonderful. Very special man. So the story goes, I saw this in a video clip from Chaim Shalom Deitch from Eretz Yisrael. It's a real story that really just happened. That there was a Jew apparently who was a student of his in his yeshivas, whatever it is, and in his late teenage years he walked away from Yiddishkeit. He was going through a hard time, whatever it might be, and he left it all. He was a Chassidish kid living in Yerushalayim with Payas and the whole thing. And he turned his back on everything and he moved down south to Eilat, to the beaches, and he's done. He got himself involved with the friends that weren't good for him and behaviors that were unhealthy for him. That was his life. A couple of years passed, and he heard that that the Sered Visions Rebbe, which was his Rebbe, is spending Shabbos in Eilat with some Hasidim, and they're going to have a tish, they're going to have like a fabringen. He decided he wants to go. This was somebody who he loved. You know, he cut his hair at the age 3. He was there for his bar mitzvah. He was there as he grew up. He was a little afraid to go, but he figured he'll hide out and he won't be noticed. He wanted to go, but apparently the Rebbe picked him out and brought him up close and made him sit there and gave him a lot of love and attention, which was very special. He was very overwhelmed. The experience brought him back to Teda mitzvahs. So they said, how did it do it? So he explained. He said at the end of the whole thing, I'm getting so much love showered on me. I'm feeling really guilty. Because does the Rebbe know that I'm not from? Does he know that I just drove to come here? This is a whole room of Hasidim. Does the Rebbe know that I drove to come here? And he felt the need as he was leaving and saying goodbye. He walked by them the custom is, you give Shalom, you give your hand, and he walks by, and he says, I want the Rebbe to know that I drove here. It was like his way of coming clean. And the Rebbe leaned over the table and he hugged him with both hands, and he told him in Yiddish, "Man Kind, zu mir kennst du kommen, wie du willst und wenn du willst. My child, to me you could come when you want and how you want." And he says that did it for him. It just turned him around 180 degrees. And he explained why. The Rebbe Madim gave him, and he said, he took me around in his embrace, in et medot ibigelost. And that's where he left me. He took me out in his embrace and he left me there. So what am I going to do? What can I bring Shabbos? I have no choice. This is Yiddishkeit. When a Yid knows that it's about him, man kind, to Hashem you're a child, and therefore whatever you do, you're not diminishing that child reality of your relationship to Hashem. It doesn't matter how you come, when you come, because it doesn't matter. It's about you. Aha! Then the Yid's going to know that he has to keep Shabbos. It's a beautiful Sicha, very powerful.